What's going on, everybody? Thank you all for tuning into this live stream segment of Mi Casa es Su Casa. And I, as always, am your humble host, Niko House. And today we are here addressing the story about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez with one half of the dynamic duo, the Convo Couch. Fiorella Isabella, what's going on? How are you doing?
Good. You know, yesterday had some friends over for my birthday. It was awesome.
Happy birthday. Happy birthday. I know. I wish I was in California for more reasons than your birthday. But that's
yeah.
But thank you for coming on and talking about this issue. Now, just in case people aren't familiar with Fee, and she obviously is known mostly for her work in the progressive community. With what she does with the Convo Couch, but there's another side of Fee that most people aren't familiar with, which is her activism and organizational side. And so when AOC came to California, Fiorella and Craig both were heavily involved in orchestrating the events that she was involved in while she was there. And so what we're going to talk about to Fee probably isn't going to seem that much of a surprise. Not only because of the interaction she's had with staff and members of her team then, but also just what she's come to learn and what we've come to learn about Justice Democrats and throughout our, just organizing. When you're on the ground, you see a different side of things than other people would see. Before we get started, did you have any reservations about the Justice Democrat? Before we start talking about the chief of staff, did you have any reservations, and what were your reservations?
Yeah, I mean, I've had reservations about them before, just based on the situation that happened back with TYT and like their whole parting ways, and also just working on the ground, seeing who they were endorsing. They've endorsed a few problematic candidates. They weren't really transparent in their use of the money and where the money was going. And this has been going on for a while. And I think this is a culmination of all of the things that they were doing that were kind of shady. And people would talk about them being shady, and it was always related to money, but nobody could pinpoint exactly what the situation was. It was just problematic candidates, problematic.
Can you give an example of like some problematic candidates that you saw? Because I found out that one was problematic, but I didn't find out until way later.
There was, I can't recall his name, but there was a young man. I believe he was of Middle Eastern descent, and he was running.
Talking about Abdullah Saeed?
Not Abdul. There was
because Abdul was problematic.
Yeah. He I was getting messages about his money situation too from people before. But the candidate I'm talking about was running for Congress, I believe. I'm not sure if it was Washington. I'm not positive, but he was problematic. He was actually going and using Republican talking points, right-wing talking points, and the Democrats didn't know anything about it. And it was just very disorganized. But there was also the other side, the side with Sarah Smith and AOC, where you had these great progressive congresswomen that they were promoting, but you never saw a heavy promotion from the AOC camp of Justice Dems either.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. And I think that's something that oftentimes gets overlooked when we're talking about the AOC conversation. And give me a second. I'm trying to figure out why my face isn't showing. My face isn't showing today. There we go.
You can't have your face not show, Niko.
Right. So basically, what I noticed when AOC blew up was that all of a sudden she was like the darling of the Justice Democrats. Right. Before it was obviously Ro Khanna, because Ro Khanna was already elected. He didn't become a Justice Democrat until after, but there were problems with Ro Khanna as well. So like just the Justice Democrats, whenever I was reading about them and the brand new Congress, and they're closely linked. And we'll go over that in the article. But my biggest complaint was when I read that all their infrastructure would be under the control of this, phantom, entity, which is basically what it is. I knew there was a problem with that. Like if you're running for office. In the case of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, that caused a lot of issues for her when she was on the latter half of her campaign after she beat, won in the primaries in New York, when she beat Joe Crowley. If you recall, I'm sure you remember when her website mysteriously deleted all of her anti-war rhetoric.
Yep.
And she didn't know. That
Yep.
means it wasn't discussed with her.
Right.
Which means she had no say in it. And then, of course, she made a big deal about it on Twitter because everybody else did. And then, of course, it was addressed. But that was just one example. And I was explaining to people that, I know this is going to sound crazy, but she's not in control of that. And they're like, no, I think she isn't. This article talks about that a little bit. So, but yeah, there was a bunch of red flags in my opinion. I do want to go ahead and get into this article because in case many of you may not have heard this news, and I got this news because Fiorella sent it to me. AOC's chief of staff, current chief of staff, ran $1 million into a slush fund by diverting campaign cash to his own companies. So two political action committees, or PACs, founded by Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's top aide, funneled over $1 million in political donations to two of his own private companies, according to a complaint filed with the Federal Elections Commission on Monday. The cash transfers from the PACs, overseen by Saket Chakrabarti. I'm probably butchering his name, so I apologize. But he's a freshman, quote unquote, freshman Socialist Democrats chief of staff. Run counter to her pledges to increase transparency and reduce influence of dark money in politics. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and off the bat kill that whole narrative. Like, I'm going to dichotomize that. Chakrabarti is not AOC. Like I just was explaining. They were disallowed. The Justice Democrats and Brand New Congress were disallowed from engaging in meddling in the funds of their various campaigns. They couldn't do it. They could obviously fundraise for themselves, but they couldn't spend that money. So, of course, this is the Washington Examiner, so they're going to have a right-leaning perspective, but I just want to go ahead and clear that up. Chakrabarti's companies appear to have been set up for the sole purpose of obscuring how the political donations were used. The arrangement skirted reporting requirements and may have violated the $5,000 limit on contributions from federal PACs to candidates, according to the complaint filed by the National Legal and Policy Center, a government watchdog group. Campaign finance attorneys described the arrangement as really weird. Unfortunately, it's not that weird, but it's weird for the situation, and is an indication that there's something amiss. They said that there was no way of telling where the political donations went, meaning they could have pocketed or used the company to pay off the books campaign operations. PACs are required to disclose how and when the funds are spent, including for expenditures such as advertisements, fundraising emails, donations to candidates, and payments for events to vendors. So before we continue, what do you got to say about that, Fee?
I mean, I want to go back to the fact that during AOC's 2016 campaign, she had, once she started getting a lot of media and a lot of popularity, there was a sector from her campaign that got upset, if you recall, and say that they had been there and they hadn't been represented well in the campaign, that new people had come in and kind of taken over, and these people were more aggressive and established
been there, and
it was that it was basically it just made them feel like they weren't represented and that they weren't used in a positive manner.
And if I recall, they were even saying it's not AOC's fault. This is something totally separate from her that we're trying to deal with, but she's almost being handcuffed by the higher ups in her campaign.
I think that's what we're seeing here. I think that Chakrabarti, or however you say his name, I don't want to butcher it more. He has so much control and has taken advantage of the situation in order to kind of I guess self-promote and climb this kind of ladder, because AOC is the most popular politician. People are hanging on who she's going to endorse for president, and this is all a culmination of all the shady things we've been seeing so far. And it's honestly horrible for her, because it's going to give people who already don't like her, who progressives and Republicans both, more ammunition to speak out against her, because a lot of people assume that she should know everything. And what we know, Niko, is that a lot of things happen in political campaigns that the person running has no idea about at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot falls through the cracks.
And this personally pisses me off because, like we were discussing earlier, Chakrabarti chose AOC to be, or he chose her campaign and her office to be the chief of staff of, because of the popularity, right? Because of how much attention she grasped, and basically it would help elevate him in the future to basically, if he runs this term correctly, which he failed clearly, he would have been set up. He would have been able to work with anybody, anywhere, especially given his neoliberal leanings. He would have been straight. And so, knowing this, for you to have participated in just, clear and obvious money laundering, when you know your candidate, your congresswoman now, is constantly under attack by the right, is ludicrous, it's selfish, it's self-serving. And once again, we don't know where the money went. And the funny part is a high probability that AOC doesn't know where that money is. Yeah. But guess they're talking about Chakrabarti. But like I said, I had to make an instant correction at the beginning of the article. They're going to link this to AOC. They're going to say, well, why didn't she know? Why wouldn't she know? It's her campaign. Because, I'm sure that once they've done enough research, they know that how the Justice Democrats are ran. They know how brand new Congresses ran. They know. They're going to ignore it. And they're going to say, you should have known. And to a degree, they're correct. She has to be held accountable to us in a sense. But if she don't have the passwords, if she don't have the keys to the kingdom, how is she going to know that things like this were happening?
Right. And it's interesting with the timing because of everything that's happening also with Ilhan Omar. We're seeing this come out relating to AOC, and then we're seeing, Ilhan basically be attacked by the entire Democratic establishment, and with very few people actually speaking to support her on her behalf. Like Bernie Sanders is one, Tulsi has been another, and AOC has been the other congresswoman. And I think it's interesting that we're seeing these two women who are doing so much in Congress that have gotten there, played no games, went on and straight attacking with the Green New Deal, exposing AIPAC, talking about things that other people don't have, like the cojones to talk about. And something like, it just seems like the timing is perfect. We're just gonna, bring AOC under more of a microscope that she's in already. Paint her as a hypocrite. You saw the articles about
relating. You know what? And that's true. I didn't even think about the timing of this article. I know about the popularity, and of course that makes her a bigger target. But you're right. This article is coming out around the exact same time that Ilhan Omar is going through all these attacks, and they're trying to figure out things to get Rashida Tlaib on. But apparently, she's squeaky clean. And obviously she had a slower rise to popularity than AOC did. But no, I 100% agree. The timing of it is sketchy. But are we surprised? Like, you have to keep your house clean if you're going to be in this type of, or have this amount of popularity and want to be this influential in politics. You can't have people like that on your staff.
No. And I think a lot of the times we're down here, the progressives, we're on the ground, we're activists, we're organizing, we're the grassroots. We know what's going on. We know the intricate relationships between people, and we know who to trust and who not to trust when you're on the ground. But once you're in the political aspect of it, the electoral politics side of it, in a campaign, that's not as obvious to you because you're looking at a different angle, a different perspective, at the bigger picture of trying to get things done electorally. So it's kind of a really difficult thing because she does practice political activism, electoral activism. So she's actually really understanding of that. But this is something that I think she has probably no idea about. And I think they're going to use that to say, well, she should know about it, and it's like, yes, you should know who works for you. Yes, you should have more of an intuitive kind of ability, but I think that's something that becomes more difficult the more involved you get electorally.
And this is a debate that we've had, not you and I, but just in the progressive wing of the left in general about Bernie Sanders, because we know what happened in 2016. We know that there were people in his campaign that were not necessarily his ally. Obviously, a lot of them were opportunistic. Some of them were only there to basically build up a resume because Hillary's campaign had already filled their staff years in advance. Working for Hillary for America, taking checks from Priorities USA and the Hillary Victory Fund, leaving various Democratic parties to join his campaign, like approving the Hillary Victory Fund. I think that happened with the former chairwoman of Vermont's Democratic Party, approved the Hillary Victory Fund funding literally like a month or two before joining Bernie Sanders' campaign. And so we've seen this type of behavior before, and people would always say, well, you should know who's in your party. You should know who you hire. But the truth of the matter is, it's almost impossible when you're that popular and that busy to know everything about every single person that you've hired. Now, with that being said, Justice Democrats have always rubbed me wrong. And the reason is not because of what Kyle had wanted them to become, or even what Cenk had wanted them to become. Because I think that Cenk, or not necessarily Cenk, but Kyle's heart was in the right place for the most part, I think. But that was always going to be a sticky situation. Because although it was co-founded by Zach Exley, Chakrabarty, Kyle, and Cenk, it was being primarily pushed by Kyle and Cenk. Now, that honestly elevated Justice Democrats to a high level of exposure very, very fast. There were some things that went down that were unethical, and I'm not going to talk about that part because it's somebody's personal pockets. But there were some things that went down that were unethical that never got addressed. But also, when you have a media conglomerate like TYT, and hell, Kyle himself is admittedly enough his own conglomerate in a lot of ways. It's almost 700,000 subscribers. When you have them pushing for the success of one party, period, because that's what basically Justice Democrats are, quote unquote, trying to reform the Democratic Party, then you are going to have media bias, whether or not you want to admit it. It's going to be there. They chose to acknowledge. Now, Kyle, admittedly enough, did call out Ro Khanna for not endorsing AOC, for example. It wasn't a lot of stories ran about it by TYT. If they even did it. I know that Kyle did specifically, but that's it. That's all I can recall. But was he as hard on Ro Khanna as he should be? I don't personally think so. If this was a quote unquote establishment Democrat or a Republican who did something to that effect, would TYT let it down? No, they would do a 30-minute segment about it and cry and whine and complain. So when a media conglomerate who is supposed to be objective is invested in the success of one party over any other party, because there are plenty of ways a media conglomerate could be involved, right? You can start a nonprofit to affect electoral reform, right? And talk about ranked choice voting and push for those things. But when you get directly involved with a party, bad things are going to happen. There's nothing good. And we got AOC out of it, but like the drama, look what the drama that being involved in this created. And now Kyle's name is attached to this, right? If you're going to take credit for the success of the Justice Democrats, you have to take ownership for this as well. Cenk's name is attached to this. Another money problem for Cenk. Chakrabarty, obviously. And then they're also attached to the names that are involved in this scandal. Zach Exley, weirdly enough, isn't mentioned here. But Zach Exley is another problem. Tim Canova brought it up to me that he knew about brand new Congress and Justice Democrats, because Zach Exley told him that was always his plan. Now, who is Zach Exley? He's the fourth co-founder of the Justice Democrats in brand new Congress. Zach Exley had this idea while he was still working for Tim Canova's campaign. Now, what often isn't talked about is the fact that Tim Canova had to fire this guy because he was corrupt to the core. So anybody who would be willing to team up with him who is active in politics and knows who this guy is, Zach Exley, you can't really trust them. Because even the brand new Congress as it stands right now, it wasn't even really started by them. It was started by, actually, I think the people were dominantly people of color, women of color. And it almost got taken over by Zach Exley. And he subsequently pushed them out. So there are a lot of problems that mire this thing in controversy. But what are your thoughts about the whole idea that because it says they talk about later on, he founded a PAC called Brand New Congress, which we just talked about, and Justice Democrats in 2017, with the goal of helping elect progressives to Congress. One of those candidates, Ocasio-cortez, last November, was the youngest woman ever elected to Congress. Now, according to the Brand New Congress website, the PAC would build a quote-unquote unified campaign infrastructure, including fundraising, organizing, rallies, advertising progressive congressional candidates across the country who could quote unquote plug into saving the individual campaign time and money. What do you think about that now? It sounded good probably on the website when people are like, oh, I don't got to do anything. What do you think about that now?
I mean, I think it sounds good on paper, but when you're looking at how now it looks just like straight out money laundering. And it's specifically because you're not seeing where that money is going, and it's a lot of money. It's not just a little bit of money.
Do you feel like it was fair for Chakrabarty and Exley to basically demand or say like, look, you don't have any control over this infrastructure, and that's the price that you're going to pay if you want to live in Congress? Do you feel like that was fair?
I mean, no. Like I mean, I do, like, as an outsider, but I think that's already sending me a red flag.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
You know what I mean? Like, it's like, yes, I understand you're right, but that's also sending me a red flag. Because
yeah. See, but I don't think that they should have. Well, because that's how the problem started, right? Because who's going to deal with the accountability if there is a red flag that goes off like this one? Chakrabarty is going to have his name mentioned. Honestly, after this, he might become more popular with the neoliberals anyway. However, AOC is going to be the one that at least temporarily takes the hit for this. She's going to be the one that has to answer these questions. She's going to have to tell the world, as one of the most popular if not the most popular congresswoman right now, to say, I didn't know. Like, I'm like, hold on, you're running the country, you're helping to run this country right now. Why didn't you know?
Right.
Because they wouldn't let me know. So the person who refused to keep you in the loop, you didn't make your chief of staff. Don't you think that he's going to probably continue that practice once he's your chief of staff? Things like that are unfair in a sense, but at the same time, there are fair questions.
Right.
And because of the fair questions, she should have access to things like her website, like her fundraising and other infrastructural aspects of her campaign. So I just can't believe that this dude is such an idiot.
It's idiotic. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. You're literally screwing something that was used to elect someone like Ocasio-Cortez. Now, anything that comes hereafter is going to be scrutinized because of this. It's kind of staining the entire progressive, kind of PAC idea.
Yeah.
It could also be brought onto Bernie Sanders too during this campaign. Oh, how do you know if Ocasio-Cortez, this guy worked for the Bernie campaign? How do we not know that this has been done through the Bernie Sanders campaign as well?
Like,
everything is going to be scrutinized.
That is very true. And here's what's even more interesting about this. Remember how, like I said, Tim Canova informed me about how corrupt Zach Exley was. And he even tipped me off saying her chief of staff was problematic, or at least the guy who was going to be her chief of staff that hadn't been announced yet was problematic. It was this guy. Now, if you look, the article continues to say that a few weeks after starting the Brand New Congress PAC, Chakrabarty formed one of the companies, Brand New Campaign LLC in Delaware, using a registered agent service and a mailbox only address. So basically, the entire point is what it looks like. The entire point of brand new Congress was to launder money. Because it seemed, remember, we were just talking about this off air. It was, why would you need to start brand new Congress and Justice Democrats?
Right.
Because I remember Anthony Clark was both. AOC was one. She wasn't both. But there are a few candidates across the country that were, I think Sarah Smith was both, actually.
Yeah, I think so too.
And so it's like, but that's redundant, right? Because that's literally what just Democrats are supposed to be doing. It's ran by the same people. It's created by the same two people. So why do it? The reason why is because he personally had more control over brand new Congress and that message and what they were going to do with it. And I think they saw how popular Justice Democrats were becoming because, I mean, let's be honest, because of the influence of TYT and Kyle, they were becoming popular. He was like, nah, we got to do something about this. I want that. I want them. I want what they got. Even though he was co-founder, he wasn't going to be able to pull what he's pulled right now as long as Cenk and Kyle were active in the campaign, because they know that would have reflected badly on them and they would have called it out immediately. So what do? You maybe release some stories to the internet that have been available for like 20 years about Cenk.
Exactly.
And I don't even like Cenk. Y'all know how I feel about him. But the timing.
Right.
The timing is everything. Yeah. Jinx.
Yeah. But it really is. I mean, we can just see where all the timing is coming together. Like all of that on Cenk and his opinions on women. They all knew about it. They, it was all out there. And then of course it got very ugly in public, and that was the only solution. And we're also seeing that through this kind of money laundering, they are still illegally going over the limit, the 500,000 pack limit.
5,000.
5,000. I'm sorry. Yeah. 5,000 pack limit. So it's either way, this is a problem because it's illegal what they're doing.
Yep. And he did it. He started this LLC 4 weeks after he started the organization. Like, you were always planning to launder the money. And it's just crazy to me. There are so many stories, and if I wish politicians would talk to each other more. I think that sometimes they get into into these shells. They become recluses because of their various campaigns, and there's a lot of running a campaign is stressful. I get that, but if AOC would have listened to him, and they were, and I think he still considers her a friend, but he came and campaigned for her in New York and endorsed her in New York. She came to his event. If AOC would listen, or would have, I don't know if they talked about it, but if she would have listened, she doesn't have to deal with this problem. If she would have even asked for his guidance after all this, like, you dealt with a lot of corruption. And I feel like anybody should. And I know for a fact, like, Bernie's campaign dealt with the last election, and they have reached out to me in various ways to, what do you think we should do about this? Because they know that corruption is real and there are real life implications. And if you get elected and there's some corruption that comes down the pipeline later, you're going to feel the heat. And sometimes it's unpreventable. But this time it was perfectly preventable because you were friends, exchanged numbers. You know who Tim Canova is. Zach Exley was a co-founder of your organization that helped you get elected. Tim fired him. All that information was available to her. Mm-hmm. And so that's something that she's going to have to reconcile herself. And I also think that that's something that other candidates should learn from. Start talking to other progressives. Start figuring. Chafee, same thing he went through with the Don Fords and Lily Stallings of the world. He had two people pretending to be progressive come in and corrupt his campaign, and they were doing this all over the country. Why was it preventable in the future? Because people listened to Chafee. No, not Chafee. Good God. Why are you letting me? Jaffe. Jaffe from California.
I thought you were just pronouncing it with a weird accent. I'm like,
Now I always say because I always pronounce my J's like ch, so whatever. But so thanks, New Beginnings, for the super chat. Greatly appreciated. But yeah, like other candidates around the country were able to avoid running into this corrupt sheep herder. Like he was always planning to portray progressives. This guy actually tried to say that Jane Sanders was the reason that Bernie Sanders lost. Like that was out of his mind. And the reason why other candidates were able to avoid him was because of the information that Jaffe from California, he ran against Nancy Pelosi. A lot of you may know him. He relinquished that information. Tim Canova, same thing. He relinquished information to other people that prevented people from making bad mistakes. That's what we need to be doing. But if you're so worried about your fame and how you'll be perceived if you associate with somebody,
right,
you're going to end up in this situation.
And that's the problem. Like we've talked about on many occasions, it's like the lack of an ability to come into the ground and actually see what's actually happening in the movement, in the revolution, and who the actual players are. Because when you're talking to a political strategist, you know, they may have all the credentials, but they really have zero clue as to what is actually going down on the ground. And I think political campaigns could learn a few things about how that works and how to like actually be on the ground and listen to progressive voices, listen to what we're all saying, because we really know what's going on.
I think there's something to be said for the lack of independent insiders within progressive campaigns. That also obviously have so like that's one of the things that political campaigns have always used. You see them on CNN all the time. They call themselves insiders, and there's an element of truth to that because they are inside of the establishment, so they know how the establishment they know their heartbeat, right? What is the best way? What is the best way for a progressive to counter that? Have the same thing,
right?
Right? Have the same thing.
Yeah. You need to have the progressive. If your base and your foundations are progressive campaigns, you need to have progressive insiders.
Yeah.
It's a really simple thing.
It's for example, I used to talk to VG, who used to be Ocasio's campaign manager, which I can say now because she's not running anymore. And one of which most people will never ever know. A lot of the reason that Ocasio's rhetoric finally came up to par was because of the conversations that I was having with VG, telling like, look, you need to have her say this. Well, why is that? Because this is what is going on in the progressive community. Make sure she avoids this topic. Make sure she avoids this person. Like those conversations are extremely important. Even if you just have someone casually advising you about what's going on. Well, how do you think of Tim Canova did that a lot and he was successful. Like, yeah, his election results don't reflect that. But we know that he really won the first time, and in all likelihood, he won the second time, which is why they use fraction magic with the machines. But the reason for his success, if you ask him, he'll tell you, keeping an ear to the streets, if you will, when it comes to the progressive community. And I don't think that there are enough progressive insiders within progressive campaigns, at least not legitimate ones.
And there's not enough progressive candidates actually reaching out and doing, wanting that kind of communication.
Yeah, figuring out who you can trust, filling out the waters.
Yeah. And it's something like, I think that especially as media, you always have to naturally fill out the waters because you're talking about different things. You're talking about everything pretty much. And you're talking about the interpersonal relationships that are happening that become so much more consequential for political campaigns. And nothing really gets past us. But when you're a politician, you're a candidate running, for some reason, especially Democrats, they think like an insider with some sort of credential is going to all of a sudden fix every problem you have. And the one thing that is essential is for progressive campaigns to not run like an establishment campaign, because you will lose, because that formula doesn't relate to you. It's not going to work for you. You are going to work because you're a grassroots campaign, because you listen to your base, your movement. That is who you need to listen to. So we do need to have more insiders in our progressive candidates, like Bernie included.
Yeah, his campaign staff thus far is pretty damn good. I can't like oh my goodness, and I cannot remember her name from New Jersey. The Latino woman from New Jersey who was like in charge of our revolution at some point, like was very well known for organizing up there, and her name is slipping me even though I've seen it over and over again.
The
Like
woman that fought for Fight for 15.
yes, that would be somebody I would consider for the most part a progressive insider.
Mm-hmm.
She was on the ground. Like, no offense to like Linda Sarsour. Like Linda Sarsour, I wouldn't consider a progressive insider. Linda Sarsour kind of sees herself above. Like, oh, I'm an influencer but that don't mean people are not having strategic conversations with her, right? She's oftentimes reacting based off of the narrative. But with a progressive insider, they're going to keep you on track no matter what narrative they try to throw at you or attach to you. And the only way you can do that is by, once again, having an ear to the streets, having a finger on the pulse of the progressive movement. Nina, I know for a fact, I can say with 100% confidence, bringing Nina on the campaign is like as a chairwoman, because people forget she was not a chairwoman before. This is the first time she's ever been the national co-chair of a campaign like this, a presidential campaign. So bringing her on, and the steps that Nina has been personally taking to ensure that she keeps in tune with the independent movement. Once again, Bernie preparing for an all-out war because he knows that the only way, and you've seen it, right? Like with his Venezuela rhetoric.
Mm-hmm.
Before he would call Maduro a dictator, he said it over and over again, multiple times. And when he didn't, Blitzer almost threw a fucking hissy fit. But he said, no, I can't, we can say that but he also, it wasn't just that people focus on the dictator part, but also he started talking about the fact that it needs to be international aid, not necessarily U.S. specific when we're talking about Venezuela. So things like that, little shifts in rhetoric show, okay, you're listening.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how you're getting the information, but you clearly have adapted, you've adapted to things that have been said, whether it be on YouTube, one of your insiders, one of your advisors, whatever. And I'm perfectly fine with that. They're going to make mistakes. I have no problem with that. But when things are preventable, like I think this is perfectly preventable, I want to know what steps you're going to take to make sure it doesn't happen again and to show that you've learned from the experience. What do you think that AOC should do regarding Chocolate Party and Justice Democrats?
I think she should obviously get rid of this guy. Any kind of relation to him, and she needs to issue a public statement explaining what she knew and what she didn't know to her, especially to her progressive base, because we can't defend her. We can defend the fact that she may have not known about this at all, but we can't really defend what actually happened, and this happened. So it's essential for her to make a public statement, because as progressive, we always hold sometimes too much these candidates to a high standard, and AOC is really popular that this can hurt her, but it's not going to be the end of her by any means. And I think if she issues a public statement, she can kind of quell a lot of the anxiety that we're having to face, because people are already like, oh, look, AOC, the Democrats' darling, look how corrupt she is, look, and she supports interventionism in Venezuela, oh look, and she lives in a luxury apartment. She's such a hypocrite.
You believe she has a doorman?
I'm already
audacity of this woman.
Messages. Yeah. So,
what do you think she should do with Justice Democrats though? Because that's the real dilemma. I think it's a no-brainer that he gets fired. If he doesn't get fired, that's a problem. We're going to. It better be a week from today. If Chakrabarty isn't wrong or isn't gone, then her and I officially have beef. I love her, but we have beef because that means you're protecting something,
right?
Or you are worried that you may be, you're worried about the effect that his absence may have on you personally. Maybe you're benefiting from him in some way that we don't know about. There are a lot of things that
we don't
know about. And if you're protecting him instead of coming out and being completely and totally transparent, that's a problem. So that's a no-brainer. But what do you think she should do with Justice Democrats? Would it help her to leave? Would it hurt her to leave? Do you think she should? Do you think she should? What do you think?
Yeah, I think she should leave. I think it would hurt her to actually stay because this is now several scandals they've been involved. Whether the Jank thing was all on Jank, whatever, they're still affiliated with that. And now this, and this is a big deal. This is, money laundering. This is something that at the very least she needs to distance herself from Justice Democrats, because otherwise they're going to constantly tie her to this incident.
Yeah. And I think that first of all, 100% agree. She has to, not only does she, and maybe once again, I'm a little bit harsh and I'm a different breed than most people, but I feel like not only should she leave the Justice Democrats, but now she has to launch if for her integrity, right? She's part of the finance committee. Yeah, she's not part of the Federal Elections Commission, but she is part of the finance committee. Money in politics is a big issue for her. She ran on this issue. You got to start an investigation. You have to. I think that if you went to save face, you tacitly benefited from and helped someone else become a millionaire because you weren't paying close enough attention to what was going on behind the scenes. Once again, I'm not here to debate whether or not it's your fault. 'Cause I know to a degree you wouldn't be in a position you are in right now unless you relinquish some of your power in that regard. Got it. But now we're not going to focus on the past. We're going to focus on what are you going to do about it. And I think that in order to clear that, it would show that she has an immovable and wavering amount of integrity to not only, obviously fire the guy, but say, look, I don't know if this organization is legitimate anymore. I don't know if it was ever legitimate. Knowing what I know now, knowing the facts, I don't know if I can allow this to persist. I don't know. I know I can't be a part of it, but now do we move into accountability? And I think that if she is going to claim to be a champion of getting big money and dark money out of politics and increase transparency, it will be her responsibility to go forward and conduct an investigation or urge the Federal Election Commission to conduct an investigation, even if it has to be a joint investigation, because I do think that some of the financing it can potentially fall under the finance committee, which she is a part of. And I just think it would send a huge message that, look, yeah, politics is corrupt, but you don't have to be part of it. Even if you've benefited from the system in some way, form, or fashion, doesn't mean you still can't hold that system accountable. Bernie does it all the time. Mm-hmm. Bernie does it. Ilhan is dealing with it right now. Elected into a corrupt system, trying to fight it from a just standpoint, but it's getting smacked by that corrupt system right now as we speak. So,
by her own people.
By her own people.
Yeah.
So, I think that would be dude took $1 million. While other Justice Democrats across the country, I don't know if you recall, were complaining that they weren't getting the funding or the staff AOC wasn't getting the funding that she needed in the beginning from Justice Democrats. People forget that. I remember one of her very first interviews. You remember Michelangelo Hamilton? Mm-hmm. A high school kid. He was 17 at the time. Interviewed AOC she was in a dark room on Facebook. It was live. The video at the time had 1,000 views or something like that. Nobody knew who she was. Nobody was bringing her on to TV, all that good stuff. And when she got popular because of that ad, the ad was able to be done because of money that she raised, because of the work that her and her volunteers had put in New York. It wasn't about JDs, but the JDs benefited from it. Mm-hmm. To the tune of $1 million, and that's just the money that we know was spent. Really quick, we have super chat from Charles Pereira. The organization that is hindering the movement for a plausible third party being caught in shenanigans. Gasp! I am shocked and appalled. And kind of right. I mean, look, me and Fee have had how many conversations we had about Justice Democrats?
So many.
A lot. Hell of a lot. And I'm going to tell you this. It isn't even just Fee or myself or people we associate with that have had reservations about the Justice Democrats. People in Bernie's campaign feel the same way. Not necessarily about AOC, but about the infrastructure, because they've worked with some of the creators of the Justice Democrats. They know the founders, not necessarily Cenk or Kyle, but the other two. They've seen how they move, and they're like, I don't know. I like AOC, but I don't trust the JDs. And I've never trust brand new Congress. I mean, they were doing things like, whenever it was talking about unions, they were talking about like basically busting up unions or letting them die. Anthony Clark was doing that in Chicago. Like it was like, what? And then you come to find out it's ran by the same people. So maybe people think I'm being too hard, and I'm not gonna like hate her if she doesn't ask for an investigation. I think if she leaves the Justice Democrats, because if this organization was specifically found out to be like created to launder money, then there's a problem. And if you're a part of that, you have to separate yourself from it and then ask for accountability.
Doesn't this openly beg into question the fact that any kind of PAC is just prone to corruption, right? Like even if you create a PAC for a progressive means, is it like, shouldn't we just literally eliminate every PAC? Shouldn't we just get money out of politics? Because obviously human nature is greedy. It's something that many people just can't. It's very few people who have the integrity to not be corrupt, and in one way or another, even if you are that kind of person.
Well, the problem is that this was a PAC that was created as like an organization, like an infrastructural organization. So like this was a little bit different than, because the people were still the ones like funding the JDs. It was still the people for the most part. So now we have another issue. People, once again, trying to be opportunistic and taking advantage of the Bernie Sanders movement, which we've seen over and over and over again. Not only, I mean, it's non-unique to just the organizational side. We've seen it in the progressive independent media world. So it's that part is a human problem. I don't know if getting rid of, the ability to organize like that is a problem, but once again, I don't think the media should have been involved in pushing it. One thing you're saying, we're pushing progressives, but like Nina said, Nina wasn't even about that "let's sheep herd everybody into the Democratic Party" nonsense. Her famous interview with Tim Black, where she said that we need to get off the Democratic and Republican plantation, and that our revolution will be endorsing anyone who has the most progressive policy, whether that be a Democrat, Republican, Independent, Green Party, red, purple, blue, or whatever. That is the line of logic that I would like to see for anybody who wants to do anything like this. But putting all of your eggs into one basket, especially for Cenk specifically, partially Kyle. Josephine Pierrulli said any PAC is subject to corruption. Thank you. Yeah. True. It's very true. But Cenk taking that money, that $20 million from Hillary's top donor, or one of the top three, and then subsequently forming or co-founding the JDs. Now, what people don't talk about is the infrastructural changes that went on in TYT at that time, because Cenk is not in charge of TYT. If he was the CEO, he is not the CEO anymore. It's some guy who has nothing to do with it. Because when you take that much money, I don't know if y'all know this, but your things don't stay the same. It's like taking a company public. Everybody will tell you in business, the moment you take a company public, it always gets worse. It will appear like it's doing better because that's how the stock market works. You need to make it look like it's doing better in order for people to keep investing. But public companies are always worse for the consumer. And that's what we saw with TYT. Now, does that have something to do with them exclusively supporting Democrats? Maybe. But when do you see them bolster a Jill Stein and a Jamal Baraka? These people on the independent side of things that aren't, particularly associated with one party or the other, that still are fighting for the same things. TYT, to my knowledge, didn't even cover the really monumentous wins by Jill Stein. They're about to have to use paper ballots in Pennsylvania now because of Jill Stein. And that election that everybody thought was rigged against Hillary for Donald Trump, that Jill Stein ultimately ended up discovering was actually still rigged against Donald Trump for Hillary. Hillary was just really bad at doing it. Because when she tried to go reconcile votes in Hillary-dominated districts, they couldn't do it. But that's a story that if you're objective, you talk about. If you're, they got all the infrastructure all the time and all the people to talk about it. It ain't never had to be Shane. It could have been Jordan. What's his name? John Iadarola. Could have been Anna. Could have been any of the people that they have. But nobody talked about it. When do they ever talk positive about the Green Party?
They barely talk about Tulsi.
Exactly. They barely talk about Tulsi, let alone the Green Party. It's always Trump. Sometimes they throw out they go after the lowest hanging fruit of a corporate Democrat. And that's about it. They're MSNBC light, as many people like to call them. But how in the hell are you going to be objective when you take $20 million from the DNC and then create a whole organization or co-found a whole organization that says, yeah, we want the Democrats to be successful. We're going to put all of our eggs in this basket. Or are you going to address the election fraud? Because how can you address election fraud if you're following the rules of the Democrats, which is when you face election fraud, you don't talk about it. Because that's what we saw with many Justice Democrats. They were told not to talk about it, not to discuss it. When we saw what happened with Cynthia McKinney, right? That's her name? Cynthia McKinney in New York?
Cynthia Nixon?
Cynthia Nixon. Why am I saying Cynthia McKinney? Because Cynthia McKinney was a congresswoman who got railroaded for APAC stuff. That's a different discussion. But when we saw what happened to Cynthia Nixon, would have done my heart good to see AOC be like, there's some problems. And she did say that there were problems, but then went on to subsequently say, we need to focus on what's next. And not endorse Cuomo, but advocated for people to vote for Cuomo.
Yeah. I feel like election fraud and the issue with that voters have is still an issue that many of these politicians, including Bernie and AOC, aren't comfortable talking about because it's so easily dismissed by the Democratic Party. It's such a divisive issue for these Democrats, for these establishment Democrats, because they still won't admit to it. And they write it off as a conspiracy. And for some reason, with all the surmounting evidence we've had since 2016, it's still not enough for it to be taken seriously. Yeah.
And for Chakrabarty to, think about if he's going to take all this money, because he took a lot of money too. And we know for a fact that AOC is his cash cow, because most of the money raised for the JDs, I would venture to say, probably came through AOC's campaign, right? Because the only two prominent ones were Ro Khanna, who had already won, and then AOC. There was little fundraising boosts across the country, little ones across the country. But nobody raised money like AOC, which is why he attached himself to that campaign. But when you got that much money in play, it's you got to know who's handling it. You do. And Cenk and Kyle were so blinded by trying to, and once again, this isn't an insult at Kyle or Cenk. I got my problems with Cenk, but I'm not saying that he purposely was expecting, he knew that this money is going to be laundered and he benefited from it somehow. That's not what I'm saying. I am saying, however, that they probably were both blinded by the reality or by the fact that they had become obsessed with reforming the Democratic Party instead of trying to use a multi-pronged approach to deal with it. The problems within the Democratic Party. AOC was a blessing that came out of all this. But now, because they were so obsessed with taking over the Democratic Party that when they saw the opportunity, they just jumped on it instead of doing the research on this guy, figuring out what his motives are, checking in on him every now and then. We might see her mandate lost. I hope it isn't. I don't want that to happen, but this is the reality of what happens when you invest. You put all your eggs in one basket, put all your eggs in one party, and your decisions start to become driven by your goal of helping one entity over the entirety of the polity. So with that being said, thank you all so much for tuning in. Fee, thanks for coming on. Everybody loved you. They said they want me to bring you back, which I imagine you will be back.
I feel like we don't do this enough.
You don't know how to use a computer.
We'll have great conversations that we should put on live, but we won't go live from each other's thing. It makes me sad, Niko.
Well, you need to learn how to use a computer. We can discuss that further. But where can people find you at, Fee?
They can find me on Facebook under Fiorella Isabel. The Convo Couch on YouTube and Facebook, as well as Twitter and Instagram. So now we have all of that. So please do subscribe to the Convo Couch. We are part of the MCSC network, and we've had a few great videos, especially the one going over Bernie's town hall. That's a really good one if you guys want to check it out.
Go check out that video. Like she said, they are on the MCSC network, and they do have their own Convo Couch YouTube page as well. I urge you all to go subscribe there. Great stuff. Her and Pasta, shout out to you. They do amazing work. I mean, like, they do some really good detailed research. In fact, in case many of you did not know, Fee was the person who originally broke that story that debunked the whole idea that Tulsi had some type of love affair with Modi, the Indian prime minister, who is considered a Hindu nationalist in the international community. She broke that story. She did the research and found out. She met with everybody. She was up damn near all night researching that story. And you know, she does very good work. And so I definitely encourage you all to go follow the Convo Couch. They do some very detailed stuff, provide a lot of proof, a lot of facts, and give you some great discussion. And so thank you for coming on once again, Fee. Make sure that y'all subscribe to this channel if you have not. Hit that damn notification bell, because people have already been telling me that they're being forced to unsubscribe and all that good stuff. They also have been telling me they haven't been getting the notifications whenever we upload something, because I uploaded 2 videos today that most of you probably don't even know about. So go check that out. Help us reach our goal of 500 patrons on Patreon. We were at a 167 last time I checked. So you can donate as little as $1, donate as much as $100, and any of that helps. It just gives us a way of measuring whether or not the content that you're receiving you find useful. You know, if this is the content that keeps you coming back and that you feel like needs to be seen by a bigger audience, this helps us know how we need to present our message and what messages that we need, or what articles and stories we need to cover to keep you all engaged, and, you know, to help you then take that information and disseminate it to whoever you need to in order to keep people educated. So thank you all for that. Patreon, the link is in the description below. And more than anything else, always remember, find your balance. Peace.